David Mercer had been managing concert logistics for 14 years, and he could tell when a show was running behind before the second hand moved. October 4th, 1992. Bucharest, National Stadium. The largest crowd Michael Jackson had ever performed for on a European tour. Somewhere above 70,000 people. And they were already 4 minutes behind schedule because Michael had personally adjusted the fog machine levels during the opening sequence. "He does this," Mercer said into his headset, standing side stage with his clipboard. "Every single show." The stadium didn't care about 4 minutes. Michael had opened with Jam, moved into Wanna Be Startin' Something, and by the time Human Nature started, 70,000 people had given themselves over to it completely. They were singing every word back at him in accents from a dozen different countries. Romanian and English and German tangled together in a way that shouldn't have worked, but did. In the front row, Clare Matthews stood with her right hand pressed flat against her chest. She was 17. Brown hair pulled back because it was warm. She was wearing a jacket that was slightly too big for her because it was Sophie's. Sophie was standing next to her, screaming every lyric, completely gone from this world, the kind of person who becomes a different version of themselves at concerts. Claire had always been like that too. 8 months ago, she had been exactly like that. She'd gotten sick in February. Just a flu at first, the ordinary kind, the kind that keeps you home from school for a week. But it didn't leave. The fever went, the cough stayed, and then one morning she woke up and tried to hum while making tea and nothing came out. Not a whisper, just air moving through a space where sound used to be. The doctor said vocal cord paresis in the calm, measured tone doctors use when they want something to sound smaller than it is. Partial paralysis of the left cord. Likely viral. Could resolve on its own. Could be permanent. Too early to say. Come back in 3 months. 3 months became 6. 6 became 8. She still couldn't sing. Not even quietly. Not even alone in her room. The sound that came out when she tried wasn't singing. It was something else. Something that frightened her more than silence did. So she stopped trying. Sophie had bought the Bucharest tickets back in April, before anyone knew how long this was going to last. "We're still going," Sophie had said in September, when Claire suggested maybe they should skip it. "You don't have to sing, you just have to be there." So she was there. Front row, third position, from the center barrier. Close enough to read the lettering on the stage monitors. Close enough that when Michael crossed to the right side of the stage during Billie Jean, she could see his face clearly. That was when he first saw her. It wasn't a dramatic moment. He wasn't doing anything special. He was performing, moving the way he always moved, unhurried even when the tempo was fast. He glanced down at the front row the way performers do, making contact with the people closest to the stage. And then something made him look again. 70,000 people were singing. The sound was physical. It pressed against your chest. You felt it in your back teeth. Every single person in that stadium was giving the song back to him. Every person except the girl in the oversized jacket standing completely still, with her hand on her sternum and her lips pressed together, and her eyes doing something that wasn't easy to name. Michael kept moving. He had a show to run. But he came back to that side of the stage 40 seconds later, and that wasn't in the choreography. "Mike, we need to pick up the pace on the transition," Mercer's voice in his earpiece. "We're 6 minutes behind." Michael touched the earpiece briefly. Not to respond, just a reflex. He moved through the next verse and the crowd gave it back to him, enormous and wall-to-wall, and he was aware of it the way you're aware of weather. But something in the front row kept pulling at his attention. Third position from the center barrier. The girl who wasn't singing. Between songs, he crouched at the edge of the stage. It looked casual from a distance, the kind of move performers make when they want the audience to feel close. But he wasn't scanning the crowd. He was looking at one person, and he stayed there a second longer than he needed to. She wasn't crying. That was what struck him. She wasn't overwhelmed. She was watching him with the focused attention of someone who understood exactly what was happening on that stage. Someone who had been close to this kind of thing before. And there was a grief in that which was different from what he usually saw in the front row. He stood back up. The next song started. But Mercer, watching from the wings, had been doing this job long enough to recognize the signs. Michael's eyes kept going back to one spot. That was not a good sign. "Whatever you're thinking," Mercer said into the headset, "we don't have time for it." Michael walked to the front of the stage. He crouched down again, closer this time, and he looked directly at Claire and made a small gesture. Just a tilt of the head, a quiet "come here." And the security guard at the barrier looked at his supervisor, and his supervisor looked at Mercer's side stage, and Mercer pressed 2 fingers against his forehead and held them there. Sophie grabbed Claire's arm. "He's pointing at you." "He's not pointing at me." "Claire, he is literally pointing at you." What happened next took about 3 minutes and was genuinely chaotic in the way unscripted moments at major stadium shows always are. Security had to coordinate. Mercer was saying things into his headset that weren't entirely professional. The band held a quiet groove, the kind they'd learned to sustain when Michael went off script, which was not as rare as the official tour documentation suggested. Claire was helped over the barrier. She stood at the base of the stage stairs. Michael came down 2 steps and sat on the 3rd one so they were roughly at eye level. He said something to her. Nobody nearby could hear what it was. The crowd noise was enormous, and the microphone was pointed down at his side. Claire answered. Her voice, the broken version of it, the one she hated, barely carried 6 inches in any direction. But Michael was leaning in close, and he heard her. He sat with that for a moment, just a moment. Then he stood up. He walked back to center stage. He raised the microphone slowly, and the crowd noise dropped the way it does when people sense that something is about to be said. "I just met someone," Michael said. The stadium went quiet enough that you could hear the monitor speakers humming at the edge of the stage. "Her name is Clare. She's been singing her whole life." He paused. Not a performer's pause. Not the kind that's calculated for effect. Something else. "She can't sing right now. Her voice is gone. And she came here tonight anyway." Mercer had stopped looking at his clipboard. "She can't sing tonight," Michael said. "But you can." He let it sit there for a second. "So here's what we're going to do. I want everyone in this stadium to sing for her. Not with me. For her." He looked down toward Claire, who was standing at the side of the stage with Sophie beside her, both of them completely still. "Every word, as loud as you've got, like she's the one singing it." He turned back to the band and counted them in. When the opening notes of "She's Out of My Life" moved through the stadium speakers, something shifted in the crowd that is hard to describe without reaching for the kind of language that cheapens it. It wasn't that 70,000 people sang louder than usual. It was that they sang with direction. They were singing toward something specific, toward one person, and that changed the texture of the sound entirely. Claire stood at the side of the stage with Sophie's hand in hers and didn't move. She was listening to her voice come back to her through 70,000 strangers. Michael sang very little of it. He stepped back from the microphone twice and just let the crowd carry it. Looking out at the stadium, then at Claire, then back at the stadium. At one point he smiled, small and private, the kind that wasn't aimed at anyone in particular. The cameras caught it, but he wasn't aware of them. Mercer had put his clipboard down somewhere. He didn't remember doing it. When the song ended, Michael came back to the side of the stage. He took off the white glove from his right hand, one of the spares the wardrobe team kept in the wings, and he gave it to Claire. He said something to her again, close, quiet, and whatever he said made her look up at him and nod once. Then he went back to the show. 14 minutes behind schedule. Mercer never brought it up. What Michael had said to her, Claire told Sophie on the bus back to the hotel, was this: "Your voice isn't gone. It's just resting. You'll know when it comes back." It came back 9 months later. Partial, not full, never quite what it had been before February. But enough. She studied at the University of Leeds, qualified as a music therapist, and spent the next 20 years working in rehabilitation, helping people who had lost physical abilities find their way back to the thing they'd lost. She specialized in voice. She knew more about the specific grief of a silenced voice than almost any other clinician in her field. And her patients sensed that she knew, and it changed how they trusted her. She kept the glove in a box on the shelf behind her desk, not displayed, just there. The recording exists. A fan somewhere in Section 11 had a handheld camera and captured about 35 seconds of it before the battery died. In the footage, Michael is barely visible, a silhouette at the edge of the frame. What you see mostly is the crowd, 70,000 faces, all angled slightly toward the left side of the stage, all singing toward the same point. You can't see Claire in the shot. She's just off frame. But the sound is there, and if you sit with it, it doesn't sound like a concert crowd. It sounds like something that doesn't have an obvious name. She didn't talk about that night publicly until 2011, when a journalist writing a retrospective on the Dangerous World Tour tracked her down through a photograph that had been circulating in fan communities for years. A girl standing at the side of the stage during the Bucharest show, completely still, while 70,000 people sang. "He didn't stop the show to make a point," Claire told the journalist. "He just noticed. That was the whole thing. He noticed that someone in the room wasn't okay, and he did something about it." The journalist asked if she thought Michael had understood what was actually wrong, whether he'd known about her voice. "I told him," Claire said. "When he leaned down and asked why I wasn't singing, I told him. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't say that's terrible. He just thought for a second and then he did what he did." She paused before she continued. "That's rarer than people realize. Most people, when they hear something sad, they respond to their own feeling about it. He responded to me." David Mercer retired in 1998. In a 2006 interview about his career in concert management, he was asked what the most memorable moment was across 14 years in several hundred shows. He named Bucharest, October 4th, 1992. "I was ready to stop it," he said. "I had my hand on the headset. We were way behind and I was already calculating what we'd have to cut." He was quiet for a moment. "I didn't stop it." The interviewer asked why not. "Because I looked at that girl's face," Mercer said, "and I understood that some things happen on a stage that the schedule genuinely doesn't have room for. And they're the only things that matter." He never went back to check what time the show ended that night.